You wake up, and before your feet even touch the ground, something has already taken control of your day. A voice, quiet, constant, unquestioned. It tells you what you can't do. It reminds you of what went wrong. It replays the same doubts, the same fears, the same invisible limits. And the most dangerous part? You believe it. Most people spend their entire lives thinking they are in control, while being silently controlled by the very thoughts they never chose. But what if I told you something that could change everything? What if I told you that the life you're living right now is not shaped by your circumstances, but by the thoughts you allow to stay? And what if I told you you can change that? In this audiobook, Control Your Thoughts and Change Your Life, you're about to step into a different level of awareness. Not surface motivation, not temporary inspiration, but deep, internal control. This is not about thinking positive. This is about thinking on purpose. Because here is the truth most people avoid. If you don't control your thoughts, they will control you. And once they control you, they control your decisions, your actions, your habits, your identity, your entire life. Today, we begin reversing that. Across this journey, you will learn how to separate yourself from your thoughts, how to recognize mental patterns that have been running your life for years, how to break those patterns, and how to rebuild a mind that works for you instead of against you. We will move through 25 chapters together, from understanding the illusion of thought, to mastering emotional reactions, to rewiring your mental habits, to building discipline that overrides distraction, to creating a mind so clear and focused that chaos no longer shakes you. This is not theory. This is transformation. And before we go deeper, understand this. This audiobook is educational and transformational in nature. But your life will only change if you apply what you hear. Because knowledge without action is just noise. Here's a line I want you to remember from this moment forward. Your thoughts are not your reality until you repeat them enough to make them real. Let that sink in. Now, ask yourself, how many of your current struggles were first just a thought? A thought that said, I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. This won't work. I always fail. And instead of questioning those thoughts, you obeyed them. That's where control was lost. And that's where we begin taking it back. If you're ready to stop being a passenger in your own mind, if you're ready to become the one who decides what stays and what goes, stay with me. Because what you're about to discover in Chapter 1 will challenge something you've believed your entire life. The idea that you are your thoughts. And once that illusion breaks, nothing will ever feel the same again. Chapter 1. You are not your thoughts. Most people never question the voice in their head. It speaks, and they listen. It judges, and they accept. It doubts, and they shrink. But let me ask you something simple. If you were your thoughts, then who is the one hearing them? Right now, as you listen to this, there is a part of you that is aware of the words, aware of the silence between them, aware of your own reactions. That awareness is not the thought. It is the observer of the thought. And this changes everything, because the moment you realize you are not your thoughts, you stop being controlled by them. You start seeing them. And once you can see them, you can question them. And once you can question them, you can change them. Most people never reach this point. They live inside a loop. The same thoughts, the same reactions, the same emotional cycles. day after day, year after year. As highlighted in the reference material you provided, people repeat the same patterns of thinking so often that those patterns become their identity. But repetition does not equal truth. It only creates familiarity, and familiarity can feel like reality, even when it's limiting you. Think about that. A thought repeated enough times becomes a belief. A belief repeated enough times becomes a behavior. A behavior repeated enough times becomes your life. So if your thoughts are flawed, your life reflects that flaw. But here's the power shift. If thoughts can build your current life, they can rebuild a new one. The question is, will you keep letting them run automatically, or will you take control? Let's go deeper. Right now, your mind produces thousands of thoughts every single day. Most of them are automatic, all conditioned by your past, your environment, your fears, your experiences. You didn't choose most of them. They were installed, and you've been running them ever since, like background software you never updated. That's why you can wake up feeling anxious for no clear reason. That's why one small comment can ruin your mood. That's why you can talk yourself out of opportunities without even realizing it. It's not random. It's programmed. But here's what most people never learn. Just because a thought appears does not mean it deserves your attention. Read that again. A thought is not a command. It is a suggestion. And you have the power to accept it or reject it. But you can only do that if you notice it. That's where awareness becomes your first tool. So here's your first practice. Not tomorrow, not later, now. Start observing your thoughts like an outsider. Don't judge them. Don't fight them. Just notice. Notice how often your mind drifts into negativity. Notice how quickly it jumps to worst-case scenarios. Notice how it replays past mistakes. Notice how it predicts failure before you even try. Just observe, because awareness is the beginning of control, and control is the beginning of change. Most people try to change their lives without changing their thinking. That's why nothing lasts, because actions without mental alignment collapse under pressure. But when your thinking changes, everything else follows. You respond differently, you decide differently, you act differently, and slowly, your life begins to reflect that shift. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Once you separate yourself from your thoughts, you start to see something most people never see. You start to see how often your mind lies to you. And in the next chapter, we're going to expose those lies, the hidden patterns, the silent distortions, the mental traps that have been shaping your life without your permission. Because once you see the lies, you stop living by them, and that's when real control begins. Chapter 2. The Lies. Your mind repeats. There is a dangerous illusion happening inside your head every single day. And it sounds like truth. It sounds like logic. It sounds like protection. It sounds like just being realistic. But in reality, it's conditioning. Your mind is not designed to make you successful. It is designed to keep you safe. And safety is not the same as growth. Safety keeps you in what is familiar. Growth demands you step into what is unknown. So when you feel resistance, when you feel doubt, when you feel hesitation, that is not always truth. That is often your mind trying to protect you from change. And the problem is, most people never question it. They hear a thought like, "This is too risky," and they stop. "I'm not ready," and they delay. I'm not good enough, and they shrink. But what they don't realize is these thoughts are not facts. They are patterns. As reflected in the material you provided, most people operate inside mental loops built years ago. Loops that repeat automatically without being challenged. And if a thought repeats enough times, it starts to feel like identity. I'm just not confident. I'm just not disciplined. I'm just not that kind of person. No, that's not identity. That's repetition. Let's break this down. Your mind creates stories, not always accurate ones, just convincing ones. And those stories shape your behavior. Here are some of the most common lies your mind repeats. The first lie: if it feels uncomfortable, it must be wrong. This one silently destroys potential because everything that leads to growth feels uncomfortable at first. Speaking up, starting something new, or taking responsibility, changing your habits. Your mind interprets discomfort as danger. But in reality, discomfort is often a signal that you're expanding. If you follow comfort, you stay the same. If you follow growth, you feel resistance. So the question becomes, are you choosing comfort or progress? The second lie: you need to feel ready before you act. This one keeps people stuck for years, waiting, preparing, overthinking. But readiness is not a prerequisite. It's a result. You don't feel confident before you act. You feel confident because you act. You don't feel clear before you start. You gain clarity through movement. Waiting to feel ready is just a more comfortable way of avoiding action, and your mind loves that because it keeps you safe. The third lie: you've always been this way. This one is subtle and dangerous because it ties your past to your future. It convinces you that change is unnatural, that growth is unrealistic, that your current patterns are permanent, but they're not. They're practiced, and anything practiced can be replaced. The fourth lie: other people are ahead of you. Comparison. One of the fastest ways to lose control of your thoughts, because the moment you compare, you shift focus away from your own path, and your mind starts creating narratives like, they're better, they're further, they're more talented. But what you don't see is their process, their struggles, their failures, their starting point. You're comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel, and that comparison steals your energy you could have used to build your own progress. The fifth lie: you'll fail, so why try? This is the mind's ultimate defense mechanism. It predicts failure to avoid disappointment. But here's what it doesn't tell you: not trying is already failure, at least when you try. You gain experience, you grow, you adapt. But when you avoid, you stay exactly where you are. And over time, that becomes regret. Now here's the key shift. You don't need to eliminate these thoughts. You need to stop believing them automatically, because thoughts lose power the moment you question them. So the next time your mind says, I can't do this, pause and ask, is that true? Or is that just familiar? That one question can break years of conditioning, because your mind relies on one thing to stay in control: unquestioned authority. The moment you challenge it, you take your power back. And that's exactly what we're building here: control. Not over the world, not over other people, but over the one place that determines everything else: your mind. Now, there's something even deeper happening beneath these thoughts. Something most people never see, because thoughts are only the surface. Underneath them are emotional triggers. automatic reactions that fire before you even think. And if you don't understand them, they will control you faster than any thought ever could. In the next chapter, we're going to uncover those triggers. We're going to slow them down, and we're going to show you how to respond instead of react. Because the moment you stop reacting automatically is the moment you start living intentionally, and that is where real power begins. Dear friend, we are just starting to work on this channel, so your likes and subscriptions will greatly help us grow. Don't be indifferent. Thank you. Chapter 3. The Invisible Triggers That Control You. Before you can control your thoughts, you have to understand something uncomfortable. You are not reacting to life. You are reacting to your interpretation of life. And most of those reactions are automatic. They happen before logic, before awareness, before control. Someone says something small, and suddenly your mood shifts. A message gets ignored, and your mind starts building stories. Something doesn't go your way, and frustration rises instantly. You didn't choose that reaction. It chose you. That's what makes it dangerous, because anything automatic can run your life without your permission, and most people never slow down enough to see it. They think, this is just how I am. But that's not truth. That's conditioning. Let's go deeper. Every reaction you have is triggered by something, a word, a tone, a memory, a situation, but the trigger itself is not the problem. The problem is the meaning your mind attaches to it. For example, someone criticizes you. The event is simple, just words. But your mind interprets it as, I'm not good enough, and now you feel hurt, or defensive, or angry. But here's the shift. It wasn't the criticism that created the emotion, it was the meaning. And that meaning was automatic, installed from past experiences, past failures, past judgments, past insecurities. That's why two people can experience the same situation and react completely differently. One sees rejection, another sees feedback. One feels attacked, another feels challenged. Same event, different interpretation, different emotional outcome. This is where control begins, not at the event, but at the interpretation, because if you can change the meaning, you change the reaction. And if you change the reaction, you change your life. But here's the truth most people avoid. Your emotional reactions are habits, not facts. Habits. Practiced over time, reinforced through repetition, just like thoughts. And just like thoughts, they can be changed, but only if you interrupt them, and that requires awareness in real time. So here's what you need to start doing. The next time you feel a strong emotional reaction, pause. Don't speak immediately. Don't act immediately. Just pause and ask yourself, what did I just make this mean? That question is powerful because it separates the event from your interpretation of the event. And once you see that separation, you gain a moment of control, even if it's just a few seconds. That moment is where transformation begins, because in that moment, you have a choice. You can react the way you always have, or you can respond differently. And that difference is everything. Let's make this real. Imagine you send a message, and hours pass without a reply. Your mind might say, they're ignoring me. They don't respect me. I did something wrong. And now your mood shifts. You feel anxious or irritated. But what if you paused and asked, what else could this mean? Maybe they're busy. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe it has nothing to do with you at all. Same situation, different interpretation, different emotional outcome. This is how you start taking control, not by forcing emotions away, but by questioning the story behind them. Because emotions follow meaning, always. Now here's something even deeper. Some triggers are not about the present, they're about the past. Old experiences that never fully resolved. Old moments where you felt rejected, embarrassed, ignored, not enough. And now, anything that even slightly resembles those moments activates the same emotional response, even if the current situation is completely different. That's why you can overreact to something small. Because it's not just about now. It's about everything that came before. And your mind is trying to protect you from feeling that again. But in doing so, it keeps you stuck in the same patterns. So here's the next level of awareness. When a reaction feels stronger than the situation, that's your signal. There's something deeper there, something unresolved. And instead of reacting, you need to observe it, sit with it, understand it, because control is not about suppression, it's about awareness. And awareness creates space, space between the trigger and your response. And in that space, you are no longer controlled. You are choosing. Now let's take this one step further, because understanding your triggers is powerful, but mastering them requires something more. It requires discipline, the ability to stay grounded even when your emotions are loud, the ability to stay clear even when your mind is chaotic. And that's what we're building next. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about emotional discipline, not ignoring emotions, not suppressing them, but controlling how you respond to them so they don't control you. Because once you master your reactions, you stop being predictable. You stop being reactive. You become stable, and stability is power. Chapter 4, Emotional Discipline, the Power of Not Reacting. There is a moment, a very small moment, between what happens to you and how you respond to it. Most people never see it because they move too fast. They react instantly. They speak without thinking. They act without awareness. And in doing so, they give away control. But the people who change their lives, the people who build calm, focus, and strength, they learn to live inside that moment, that space. Because inside that space, you are free. Free from automatic reactions, free from emotional impulses, free from the patterns that used to control you. That space is where discipline begins. Let's be clear about something. Emotional discipline is not about becoming cold. It's not about pretending you don't feel. It's not about suppressing emotions. It's about choosing your response instead of being driven by it. Because emotions are powerful, but they are not commands. They are signals, and signals can be observed without being obeyed. Think about how most people live. They feel anger, so they react with anger. They feel fear, so they avoid. They feel doubt, so they stop. Emotion to reaction, no pause, no awareness, no control, just automatic behavior. And over time, that becomes identity. I'm just short-tempered. I'm just anxious. I'm just like this. No, you just practice reacting that way over and over again, and anything practiced becomes automatic. But here's the shift. If reactions can be practiced, so can restraint, so can control, so can discipline. And it starts with one simple rule. You don't have to act on the first feeling. Let that sink in. Just because you feel something does not mean you have to respond immediately. That one realization can save relationships, can prevent mistakes, can protect your future, because most damage in life doesn't come from thinking too much. It comes from reacting too fast. A message sent in anger, a decision made in frustration, words spoken without awareness, moments, small moments, that create long-term consequences, all because there was no pause, no space, no control. But now you know there is always a space, and you can train yourself to live in it. Here's how. The next time you feel a strong emotion rising, anger, fear, frustration, jealousy, don't fight it. Don't suppress it. Just notice it and say to yourself, I feel this, but I don't have to act on it. That sentence creates distance between you and the emotion. And in that distance, you gain clarity. Because emotions are loud, but they are not always accurate. Anger can exaggerate, fear can distort, doubt can limit. If you act inside those states, you act from distortion. But if you pause, you allow clarity to return, and clarity leads to better decisions. Now here's where it gets deeper. Emotional discipline is not built in calm moments. It's built in intense ones. When everything inside you wants to react, that's your training ground. That's your opportunity. Because every time you choose not to react impulsively, you strengthen control. Every time you pause, you build awareness. Every time you respond with intention, you rewrite your patterns. And slowly, you become someone different, someone stable, someone grounded, someone who cannot be easily shaken. And that kind of person moves differently through life. They don't get pulled into drama. They don't lose themselves in chaos. They don't let emotions dictate their direction. They observe, they decide, they act with control, and that control becomes their power. Now let's connect this to something important. In today's world, you are constantly being triggered. Notifications, messages, social media, news, opinions. Your attention is being pulled in every direction, and your emotions are constantly being activated. If you don't have discipline, you become reactive to everything, every comment, every post, every opinion, and that destroys your focus, your clarity, your peace. That's why emotional discipline is no longer optional. It's necessary. Because if you don't control your reactions, the world will control them for you, and you will spend your life responding instead of creating. Now here's a powerful shift to remember. You don't need to win every moment. You need to stay in control of yourself. That's it. Not proving a point, not reacting to everything, not defending every opinion, just control. Because control protects your energy, and your energy is your most valuable resource. Where your energy goes, your life follows. So if your energy is constantly reacting, your life becomes chaotic. But if your energy is directed, your life becomes intentional. And that's what we're building. Now, there's one more layer to this. Because controlling your reactions is powerful, but controlling what enters your mind is even more powerful. Because not every thought comes from within. Some are planted by what you consume, what you watch, what you listen to, who you surround yourself with, and if you don't filter that, you will constantly be fighting thoughts that were never yours to begin with. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about mental input, what you allow into your mind, and how it silently shapes your thoughts, your emotions, and your entire life. Because control is not just about reacting better, it's about choosing better inputs. And once you understand that, you stop feeding the very patterns you're trying to escape. Chapter 5. Guarding the Gate. What you let into your mind, there is something happening to you every single day. Quietly, constantly, without permission. Your mind is being influenced, not just by your own thoughts, but by everything you consume, what you watch, what you scroll, what you listen to, who you spend time with. All of it feeds your thinking and eventually becomes your thinking. Most people never realize this. They try to control their thoughts while continuously feeding their mind with chaos, negativity, distraction, comparison, noise, and then they wonder why their mind feels out of control. But here's the truth. You cannot build a clear mind with a polluted input. You cannot expect discipline if your environment rewards distraction. You cannot expect confidence if your daily content reinforces doubt. Your mind is not just something you control internally. It is shaped externally. And if you don't take responsibility for what enters it, you will always be reacting to things you didn't choose. Let's make this real. Think about how your day usually begins. For many people, the first thing they do is reach for their phone, messages, social media, news. Before their mind is even awake, it's already being filled. Other people's opinions, other people's lives, other people's problems. And from that moment, their thoughts are no longer fully theirs. They've been influenced, triggered, shifted, directed, and it continues throughout the day. Scroll, watch, listen, react. Without realizing it, you are constantly programming your own mind, and most of that programming is not intentional. That's the problem. Because what you consume shapes what you think, and what you think shapes how you feel, and how you feel shapes what you do, which means your input determines your output. So if your output is not where you want it to be, start by looking at your input. Now, this doesn't mean you isolate yourself from the world. It means you become selective, intentional, aware. Because not everything deserves access to your mind. Let me say that again. Not everything deserves access to your mind. But most people give access to everything. Every opinion, every piece of content, every distraction, and over time, their mind becomes crowded, noisy, unfocused, and in that noise, control is lost. So here's the shift. You need to start guarding your mental environment like it matters, because it does. Here are a few simple but powerful changes. First, be intentional with your mornings. Before you let the world into your mind, take control of it yourself. Even 5 minutes of silence, of reflection, of setting direction. Because how you start your day shapes your thinking for the rest of it. As echoed in the reference material, the first moments after waking set the tone for your mental state. Either you take control or you lose it before the day even begins. Second, reduce unnecessary noise. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every notification matters. Not every piece of content is worth your energy. Start asking yourself, is this helping me or distracting me? Because distraction is not harmless. It fragments your thinking. It weakens your focus. It trains your mind to jump instead of stay. And a distracted mind is a controlled mind, controlled by whatever captures its attention. Third, choose your influences carefully, the people you listen to. the voices you follow, the environments you stay in, they all shape your thinking. If you surround yourself with negativity, your mind absorbs it. If you surround yourself with growth, your mind expands. This is not about judgment, it's about awareness. Because influence is constant, whether you notice it or not. Fourth, create space for your own thoughts. Most people are so busy consuming, they never reflect. They never sit in silence. They never process. And without that space, your mind becomes reactive instead of intentional. Even a few minutes of quiet can reset your thinking, can clear your mind, can bring you back to control. Now here's something deeper. If you don't choose what enters your mind, someone else will. And their agenda is not your growth. It's your attention, your time, your focus, your energy. And once they have that, they influence your thoughts without you even realizing it. That's why control starts here, at the gate, at what you allow in. Because once something enters your mind, it becomes a thought. And once it becomes a thought, it can shape your reality. So be selective, be intentional, be aware. Because your mind is not just something you have, it's something you must protect. Now, once you start controlling your input and observing your thoughts and managing your reactions, something powerful begins to happen. You start creating clarity, real clarity, the kind that cuts through noise, the kind that allows you to focus. And focus is the next level of control, because a distracted mind cannot build anything, but a focused mind can build everything. In the next chapter, we're going to break down how to sharpen your focus, how to stop your mind from drifting, and how to train your attention so it works for you instead of against you. Because once you control your focus, you control your direction. And direction is what shapes your future. Dear viewers, write which city you're from. It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 6. Focus. The skill that decides everything. There is a silent war happening in your life right now. Not outside you, inside you, a war for your attention. And whoever wins that war controls your future, because your life is not built by what you want. It is built by what you focus on. Let that land. You can have goals, dreams, plans, but if your focus is scattered, your results will be too. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they lack sustained attention. They start, they stop, they get distracted, they restart, over and over again, and they call it bad luck. But it's not luck. It's lack of focus. Now here's the truth most people avoid. Focus is not something you have. It's something you train. Because your mind by default does not want to focus. It wants novelty, stimulation, distraction, and it wants to jump from thought to thought, from app to app, from idea to idea. And in today's world, that behavior is constantly rewarded. Every notification pulls you, every scroll refreshes you, every distraction entertains you. But here's the cost. A distracted mind becomes a weak mind, and a weak mind cannot build a strong life, because anything meaningful requires sustained attention, deep work, real progress, lasting change. All of it depends on your ability to stay with something, even when it's not exciting, even when it's uncomfortable, even when your mind wants to escape. That's where focus becomes power, because when you can stay, while others drift, you start building momentum, and momentum changes everything. Let's go deeper. Every time you switch your attention, you lose energy. Your brain has to reset, refocus, re-engage, and that constant switching creates mental fatigue. That's why you can feel busy all day, but accomplish nothing meaningful, because your attention was scattered. Now imagine the opposite. You sit down and give your full attention to one thing. No distractions, no switching, no interruptions, just presence. That's when your thinking sharpens. That's when ideas connect. That's when real progress happens. But most people rarely experience this because they never train their focus long enough. They give in too quickly to boredom, to discomfort, to distraction. And every time they do, they weaken their ability to stay. So here's the shift. You need to treat focus like a discipline, not a feeling. You don't wait until you feel focused. You decide to focus, and then you hold that decision, even when your mind resists, especially when your mind resists, because that resistance is where growth happens. Now, here's something powerful. Focus is not just about what you do. It's about what you ignore. Every time you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else. So if you say yes to distraction, you are saying no to progress. If you say yes to noise, you are saying no to clarity. If you say yes to everything, you lose control of your direction. That's why focus requires elimination, not just addition. You don't need more tools. You need fewer distractions. You don't need more motivation. You need more boundaries, because boundaries protect your attention, and your attention is your most valuable asset. Now let's make this practical. Here's a simple way to start training your focus. Choose one task. Set a clear intention and commit to staying with it for a specific period of time. No switching, no checking, no interruptions. Even if it's just 20 minutes, start there. Because focus is built in increments, not all at once. And every time you complete that session, you strengthen your ability to stay. Now here's where it gets deeper. Focus is not just external, it's internal. It's not just about what you do. It's about how you think while doing it. Because you can be physically present, but mentally distracted, thinking about something else, worrying about something else, drifting into unrelated thoughts. That's where thought control comes back in. Because to truly focus, you need to guide your mind back again and again. Every time it drifts, you bring it back. Without frustration, without judgment, just awareness. That repetition is what builds mastery. Now think about this. If you can control your focus, you can control your direction. And if you can control your direction, you can control your results. That's how powerful this is. Because most people are not lacking effort. They're lacking direction. And direction comes from focus. Now, there's something that constantly destroys focus, even when you're trying to build it. Something subtle, something internal, overthinking, the endless loop of thoughts that pull you away from action. And in the next chapter, we're going to break that cycle. We're going to show you how to stop overthinking without suppressing your mind. Because once you quiet that noise, your focus becomes unstoppable. And when your focus becomes unstoppable, so does your progress. Chapter 7. Overthinking. The trap that feels like progress. There is a pattern that looks intelligent, feels productive, but silently keeps you stuck. Overthinking. It convinces you that you're analyzing, planning, preparing, but in reality, you're delaying, you're looping, you're staying in motion without moving forward. And the worst part? It feels justified because your mind tells you, I just need to think this through a little more. But how many times have you thought something through and still didn't act? How many times have you replayed a decision only to end up exactly where you started? That's not thinking. That's a loop. And loops don't lead anywhere. They just keep you busy while time passes. Now let's be clear. Thinking is not the problem. Overthinking is, because thinking leads to clarity. Overthinking leads to confusion. Thinking moves you forward. Overthinking keeps you stuck. So what's the difference? Direction? Thinking has a purpose. It leads to a decision. Overthinking has no end point. It keeps expanding. What if this goes wrong? But what about that? Maybe I should wait. Maybe I should do more research. And before you realize it, you've created 10 different scenarios, none of which exist. And now you feel overwhelmed, not because the situation is complex, but because your mind made it complex. That's what overthinking does. It turns simple into complicated. It turns action into hesitation. It turns possibility into doubt. And the longer you stay in it, the harder it becomes to move, because your mind is now filled with noise, contradictions, fears, hypotheticals. And in that noise, clarity disappears. Now, here's the deeper truth. Overthinking is not about intelligence. It's about control. Your mind is trying to control the outcome before you act. It wants certainty, guarantees, safety. But life doesn't work that way. You don't get certainty before action. You get clarity through action. That's the shift. You don't think your way into progress. You move your way into clarity. But overthinking keeps you in place because it gives you the illusion of progress without the risk of action. And your mind prefers that because action is uncomfortable. Action exposes you to failure, to judgment, to uncertainty. But overthinking protects you from all of that at the cost of growth. So here's the question. Are you thinking to move forward or thinking to avoid moving? Be honest, because that answer determines everything. Now let's break this pattern. The first step is awareness. Notice when you're looping. Notice when the same thought repeats without leading to a decision. Notice when you're creating more questions instead of answers. That's your signal. You're not thinking anymore. You're overthinking. And in that moment, you need to interrupt it, not with more thinking, but with action. Small action. Because action breaks the loop. Even the smallest step creates momentum, and momentum silences doubt. Think about it. When you finally act on something you've been overthinking, what happens? Clarity, relief, movement. Because action answers questions that thinking never could. Now, here's a powerful rule to remember. If a thought doesn't lead to action, it's probably a distraction. Let that guide you. Because your mind will always offer more thoughts, more scenarios, more possibilities. But you don't need all of them. You need direction. So instead of asking, what's the perfect decision? Start asking, what's the next step? That question simplifies everything, because progress is not built on perfect decisions. It's built on consistent movement. Now here's where it gets even more important. Overthinking is often tied to fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of making the wrong choice. So your mind keeps you thinking to avoid feeling that fear. But here's the truth. You don't eliminate fear by avoiding action. You eliminate fear by moving through it, because every time you act despite fear, you weaken its control, and every time you avoid, you strengthen it. So overthinking is not neutral. It's training your mind, either toward action or toward avoidance. And over time, that training becomes your default. So choose carefully. Now let's connect this back to control. If you can recognize overthinking, interrupt it, and replace it with action, you take your power back. You stop being trapped in your own mind. You start using your mind instead of being used by it. And that's the shift we're building. Now, there's something that makes overthinking even stronger, something that fuels it, feeds it, keeps it alive, your environment. Because if your environment is filled with distraction, your mind will always have something to latch on to. And in the next chapter, we're going to take this even deeper. We're going to talk about discipline, real discipline, not motivation, not temporary bursts of energy, but the ability to act, even when your mind resists. Because control is not proven when things are easy. It's proven when things are hard. And that's where discipline becomes your foundation. Chapter 8, Discipline. Acting when your mind says no. There will be moments, many of them, where your mind will tell you to stop, to wait, to delay, to choose comfort. And in those moments, you will discover who is really in control. Because it's easy to feel motivated when things are going well. It's easy to think clearly when you feel inspired. It's easy to act when everything feels aligned. But that's not where your life is shaped. Your life is shaped in the moments when you don't feel like it. When your mind resists, when your energy is low, when your thoughts are telling you to quit. That's where discipline takes over, and discipline is what separates intention from reality. Let's make something clear. Discipline is not about being perfect. It's not about always feeling strong. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when your mind disagrees, because your mind will always try to negotiate. Just this once. I'll start tomorrow. I deserve a break. And if you listen, that negotiation becomes your pattern. As highlighted in the material you provided, the moment you start negotiating with comfort, it gains control over your actions. And once that happens repeatedly, discipline weakens, progress slows, and your life stays the same. But here's the shift. You don't negotiate with what you know matters. You decide, and then you act, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable, because discomfort is the price of growth, and discipline is your ability to pay that price without hesitation. Now let's go deeper. Your mind is designed to conserve energy, to avoid effort, to stay in what's familiar. That's why it resists change. That's why it creates excuses. That's why it convinces you to delay. But discipline overrides that. It says, I hear you, but I'm moving anyway. That's power. Because the moment you stop relying on how you feel and start relying on what you decide, you take control. Now think about this. How many times have you said, I don't feel like it today, and then did nothing? That one sentence has stopped more progress than failure ever has. Because feelings are temporary, but decisions shape your life. So if your actions depend on your feelings, your progress will always be inconsistent. But if your actions depend on your decisions, your progress becomes steady. And steady progress creates real change. Now here's something important. Discipline is not built in big moments. It's built in small ones. The moment you choose to get up, the moment you choose to focus, the moment you choose to continue, even when it's easier not to, Those small decisions stack, and over time, they become your identity. You become someone who follows through, someone who doesn't rely on motivation, someone who acts even when it's hard. And that kind of person wins, not because they're more talented, not because they're more lucky, but because they're more consistent. Now let's connect this back to your thoughts. Because discipline is not just physical, it's mental. It's the ability to override unhelpful thoughts. To hear, I can't do this, and still continue. To feel doubt, and still move forward. To experience resistance, and not obey it. That's mental discipline. And it's one of the most powerful skills you can build. Because once you develop it, your thoughts lose their authority. They become suggestions, not commands, and you become the one deciding what happens next. Now, here's a powerful shift to remember. You don't need to win every day. You need to show up every day, because consistency beats intensity. Always. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be present again and again, because every time you show up, you reinforce control. And every time you don't, you reinforce avoidance. So choose wisely. Now let's go one level deeper. Discipline is easier when your environment supports it, and harder when it doesn't. Because your environment either reduces resistance or increases it. If distractions are everywhere, discipline becomes harder. If your space is chaotic, your mind becomes chaotic. If your habits are unstructured, your actions become inconsistent. That's why discipline is not just internal, it's external. It's how you design your environment to support the person you're becoming. And in the next chapter, we're going to build that. We're going to talk about habits, the systems that run your life automatically. Because right now, whether you realize it or not, your life is already automated by your habits. And if you don't control them, they will control you. But once you understand how to build them intentionally, you stop relying on willpower and start building a system that works for you. And that's where control becomes effortless. Chapter 9. Habits. The system running your life. There is something controlling your life right now, without asking you, without announcing itself, without needing your permission. Your habits, the small things you do every day, the patterns you repeat, the actions you no longer think about. That's what's shaping your life, not your intentions, not your goals, not your plans, your habits. Because what you do occasionally doesn't define you. What you do consistently does. And most people are living on autopilot, waking up the same way, thinking the same thoughts, repeating the same behaviors day after day, and then wondering why nothing changes. But here's the truth. Your life is not a result of what you want. It's a result of what you repeat. Let that sink in. Because if your habits stay the same, your life will too. No matter how motivated you feel, no matter how many plans you make, no matter how much you want change, because habits override motivation every time. Now let's go deeper. A habit is simply a repeated action, but over time, it becomes automatic. And once something becomes automatic, it requires less effort, less thinking, less awareness. That's why habits are powerful, because they run in the background. And whatever runs in the background controls your results. So if your habits are weak, your life reflects that. If your habits are strong, your life reflects that too. Now here's the key insight. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your systems. And your system is your habits. That's why some people succeed consistently, while others struggle repeatedly. It's not just mindset, it's structure. It's what they do every day without needing to think about it. Now connect this to your thoughts, because every habit starts as a thought, a decision, a small action, repeated over time, and eventually it becomes automatic. That means if you can control your thoughts, you can build your habits. And if you can build your habits, you can build your life. But here's where most people fail. They try to change everything at once. Big goals, big changes, big expectations. And then they burn out. Because change doesn't happen in big moments. It happens in small repeated actions. So here's the shift. Stop trying to change your life overnight. Start changing your daily patterns, because small habits create massive results over time. Now, let's make this practical. If you want to build discipline, start with one habit, not 10. One. Something simple, something repeatable, something you can commit to every single day. Because consistency is more powerful than intensity. You don't need to do everything perfectly. You need to do something consistently. Now, here's something important. Habits are not just built by effort. They are built by environment. Your surroundings either support your habits or fight against them. If your environment is filled with distractions, your habits will reflect that. If your environment supports focus, your habits will align with that. So instead of relying only on willpower, start designing your environment. Remove what distracts you. Add what supports you. Simplify your choices, because the easier a habit is to perform, the more likely you are to repeat it, and repetition is what creates change. Now, here's a deeper layer. Your habits don't just shape your actions, they shape your identity. Every time you repeat a behavior, you reinforce a belief about yourself. I'm someone who follows through. I'm someone who stays disciplined. I'm someone who takes control. Or, I'm someone who quits. I'm someone who delays. I'm someone who avoids. And over time, that belief becomes your reality. So every habit is not just an action. It's a vote for the person you're becoming. That's powerful, because it means you don't need to become a different person first. You become a different person by changing what you do repeatedly. Now imagine this. If you controlled your thoughts, managed your reactions, focused your attention, acted with discipline, built strong habits, what would your life look like? Different, completely different, because control is not one big change. It's a series of small decisions, repeated consistently. Now here's the next step. Once you build habits, you create stability. But there's something that can still disrupt everything. Something internal, something emotional, stress, pressure, overwhelm. Because even with strong habits, if your mind collapses under pressure, you lose control. And in the next chapter, we're going to address that. We're going to talk about how to stay mentally strong when life gets difficult, when things don't go your way, when pressure builds, because control is not proven in easy moments. It's proven in hard ones. And that's where your true strength is revealed. Chapter 10. Staying strong when life pushes back. There will be moments in your life when everything you've built internally gets tested. Moments when your plans fall apart, when things don't go your way, when pressure builds from every direction. And in those moments, your thoughts will get louder. Doubt will return. Fear will rise. Old patterns will try to take control again. This is where most people break. Not because they're weak, but because they never trained for resistance. They trained for motivation, and motivation disappears the moment life gets hard. But discipline, control, awareness, those are what hold you steady. This is where everything we've built so far comes together. Because controlling your thoughts is not about calm days. It's about chaotic ones. It's about what you do. When things don't feel good, when nothing feels certain, when your mind starts telling you, this isn't working, you should stop, this is too much, that's the moment that defines you. Because in that moment, you either return to old patterns or you step into a new level of control. Now let's be honest. Pressure changes people. It reveals habits. It exposes weaknesses. It amplifies thoughts. If your thinking is fragile, pressure will break it. If your thinking is trained, pressure will sharpen it. That's the difference. Now here's something powerful. Stress does not come from what's happening. It comes from how you interpret what's happening. Just like we talked about before. Same event, different meaning, different emotional response. One person sees pressure as a threat. Another sees it as a challenge. One feels overwhelmed. Another feels focused. The situation is the same. The thinking is different. And that thinking determines the outcome. So the question is, how do you stay strong when everything feels unstable? It starts with awareness. When pressure hits, notice your thoughts. Notice the shift. Notice how quickly your mind moves toward negativity. Worst-case scenarios, self-doubt, fear-based thinking. That's your signal, not to panic, but to pause. Because your mind is trying to protect you again, trying to pull you back into safety. But growth doesn't exist in safety. It exists in pressure. Now here's the key. You don't fight pressure. You learn to operate inside it. You stay grounded. You slow down your thinking. You return to what you can control. Because when everything feels uncertain, control becomes your anchor. What can you control? Your breathing, your actions, your focus, your response. Not the entire situation, not the outcome, just your part, and that's enough. Because when you stay in control of your part, you stop feeding the chaos. You stop amplifying the problem. You stay clear, and clarity creates better decisions. Now, here's a powerful technique. When you feel overwhelmed, simplify. Don't try to solve everything at once. Don't try to control everything at once. Just focus on the next step, not the whole path, just the next move. Because overwhelm comes from trying to carry too much at once, but progress comes from moving one step at a time, and every step builds momentum. Now let's go deeper. Pressure also reveals your emotional habits, how you react, how you think, how you behave under stress. That's your baseline. That's what you've trained. So if you don't like how you respond under pressure, that's not a failure. That's feedback. It shows you what needs to be strengthened. Because control is not about never feeling overwhelmed. It's about not losing yourself when you do. And that's a skill, a trainable skill. Now think about this. If you can stay calm when things go wrong, you gain an advantage. While others panic, you think. While others react, you respond. While others lose control, you stay steady. And that steadiness becomes your edge. Because most people collapse under pressure, but you won't. Not if you train this, not if you build this awareness. Now here's something important to remember. You don't need perfect conditions to stay in control. You need a trained mind because perfect conditions don't exist. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be challenges. There will always be moments where things feel unstable. But if your mind is stable, you can handle anything. Now let's connect this back to everything we've built. You observe your thoughts. You question them. You manage your reactions. You control your input. You train your focus. You act with discipline. You build habits. And now, you stay strong under pressure. This is how control becomes complete, not perfect, but consistent. Now, there's one more layer we need to address. Because even if you control your thoughts, even if you stay disciplined, even if you build strong habits, there is something that can still limit you. Something internal, something quiet, your self-image, the way you see yourself. Because no matter how much you change externally, if you still see yourself the same way internally, you will return to old patterns. And in the next chapter, we're going to break that. We're going to redefine how you see yourself. Because the identity you hold determines the life you live, and once that shifts, everything else follows. Friend, write your opinion on this topic in the comments. Do you agree with us or not? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Chapter 11, Your Identity, the hidden script behind your life. There is something deeper than your thoughts, deeper than your habits, deeper than your actions, something that silently controls all of it, your identity, the way you see yourself, not what you say out loud, but what you believe internally. Because every thought you allow, every action you take, every habit you repeat, is filtered through one question your mind constantly asks. Is this who I am? And if the answer is no, you will resist it, even if it's good for you, even if it can change your life. That's why so many people struggle to stay consistent. It's not because they don't know what to do. It's because what they're trying to do doesn't match who they believe they are. Let that sink in. If you see yourself as someone who lacks discipline, you will sabotage discipline. If you see yourself as someone who always quits, you will eventually quit. If you see yourself as someone who is not confident, you will avoid situations that require confidence, not because you can't change, but because your identity is trying to stay consistent. And your mind will always choose consistency over improvement. That's the problem, because if your identity is outdated, your life will stay limited. Now here's the shift. You don't change your life by changing what you do. You change your life by changing who you believe you are. Because once your identity shifts, your actions follow naturally. Let's go deeper. Right now, you have a mental image of yourself, built over years, from experiences, from feedback, from failures, from past versions of you. And that image feels real, feels fixed, feels like truth, but it's not truth. It's a collection of repeated beliefs, and beliefs can be rewritten. Now here's where it gets powerful. Every time you take action, you send a signal to your identity. Every time you follow through, you reinforce, I'm someone who does this. Every time you stay disciplined, you reinforce, I'm someone who stays consistent. Every time you control your thoughts, you reinforce, I'm someone who is in control, and over time, those signals reshape your identity. Not instantly, but consistently. That's the key. Because identity is not changed by one big moment. It's changed by repeated evidence, small actions, stacked over time. Now think about this. If you want to become someone disciplined, don't focus on being perfect. Focus on proving it in small ways. Show up once, follow through once, stay consistent once, and then repeat it. Because every repetition builds evidence, and evidence builds belief, and belief builds identity. Now, here's something important. Your identity is always listening, always watching, always updating, based on what you do, not what you say. So if you keep saying, I want to change, but your actions stay the same, your identity doesn't shift because it trusts evidence, not intention. That's why action is so important, not just for results, but for identity. Because every action is a message that says, this is who I am becoming. Now let's connect this back to thought control, because your identity influences your thoughts. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, your thoughts will reflect struggle. If you see yourself as someone who grows, your thoughts will reflect possibility. So changing your identity changes your thinking, and changing your thinking changes your life. It all connects. Now, here's a powerful exercise. Start asking yourself, what would the version of me I want to become do right now? Not what you feel like doing, not what's easy, but what aligns with that identity, and then act on that. Because every time you do, you step into that version of yourself. Not someday, now. And the more you do that, the more natural it becomes, until one day, it's no longer something you're trying to be. It's who you are. Now, here's the truth most people never realize. You are always becoming someone. The question is, are you doing it consciously or by default? Because if you don't choose your identity, your past will choose it for you. And your past does not define your future unless you let it. So choose, decide, define who you are becoming, and then build it, thought by thought, action by action, habit by habit. Now, there's one more piece to this, because even with a strong identity, even with discipline, even with control, there will be moments when doubt tries to return. Old thoughts, old patterns, old beliefs. And in the next chapter, we're going to learn how to deal with that. How to stay consistent, even when your old self tries to come back. Because growth is not linear, and the real challenge is not starting, it's staying. Chapter 12. When the old you tries to come back, there will be days when you feel like you're making progress, clear thinking, strong discipline, focused action, and then suddenly something shifts. Old thoughts return, doubt creeps in, motivation drops, and for a moment it feels like you've gone backwards, like nothing changed, like you're back at the beginning. This is the moment where most people quit, because they misunderstand what's happening. They think, I thought I fixed this. Why am I feeling this again? Maybe I haven't changed at all. But here's the truth. You didn't go backwards. You just encountered your old patterns again. And that's part of the process. Growth is not a straight line. It's a cycle. You rise, you stabilize, you get tested, and then you rise again. But if you expect progress to feel perfect, you will always be disappointed, because real change is not about never feeling the old patterns again. It's about responding to them differently when they show up. That's the difference. Let's go deeper. Your old habits, your old thoughts, your old emotional reactions, they've been repeated for years. They are deeply wired. So when you start changing, they don't disappear instantly. They wait, and then they resurface, triggered by stress, triggered by fatigue, triggered by familiar situations. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can fall back into them, or you can recognize them, and that recognition is everything. Because before, you didn't notice. You just reacted. Now, you see it. You catch the thought. You feel the pattern. You recognize the trigger. And that awareness means you've already changed, even if it doesn't feel like it. Now here's the key. Don't fight the old version of you. Don't hate it. Don't resist it aggressively. Understand it. Because that version of you was built to protect you, to keep you safe, to avoid pain. It just did it in a way that limited your growth. So instead of fighting it, acknowledge it. I see this thought. I recognize this pattern. And then choose differently. That's how you evolve. Not through force, but through awareness and choice. Now here's something powerful. Every time you respond differently, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen the new one. Even if it's small, even if it's not perfect, it counts. Because change is not about perfection, it's about direction. Are you moving forward or falling back into automatic behavior? That's the only question that matters. Now let's make this real. Imagine you've been working on controlling your thoughts, and one day you feel overwhelmed. Your mind starts racing. Negative thoughts return. Old doubts resurface. The old version of you would react instantly, spiral, overthink, lose control. But now, you pause, you notice, you say, this is the old pattern. That one sentence creates distance. And in that distance, you choose. Maybe you don't handle it perfectly. Maybe the emotion is still strong, but you don't lose yourself in it. And that is progress, real progress. Because control is not about never feeling triggered. It's about not being controlled by the trigger. Now here's another layer. Your mind will try to convince you that one bad moment means failure. That ruined everything. I'm back to where I started. What's the point? That's another lie. Because one moment does not erase your growth. One thought, one reaction, one difficult day does not define you. What defines you is what you do next. Do you continue or do you stop? That's where control is proven, not in perfect streaks, but in recovery, in resilience, in your ability to return to awareness again and again. Now think about this. If every time you slipped, you came back stronger, what would your life look like? Different, because most people don't fail from one mistake. They fail from stopping after it. But you won't. Not if you understand this, not if you expect this, not if you prepare for this. Because the old version of you will show up. That's not the problem. The problem is whether you listen to it or observe it. Now let's connect this to your identity, because every time you choose differently, you reinforce your new self. I'm someone who stays aware. I'm someone who doesn't get pulled back easily. I'm someone who keeps moving forward, and that identity becomes stronger. Stronger than your past. Stronger than your patterns. Stronger than your doubts. Now here's a powerful reminder. You are not trying to eliminate your old self. You are outgrowing it. And growth takes repetition, patience, consistency. So don't rush it. Don't expect perfection. Just stay in control. Thought by thought, moment by moment, choice by choice. Now, there's something even deeper we need to address, because sometimes the biggest challenge is not external, not habits, not discipline, not focus. It's internal resistance, that quiet voice that says, this is too hard. This isn't worth it. Why even try? And in the next chapter, we're going to face that directly. We're going to break through resistance, because once you understand how to move through it, nothing can stop you. Chapter 13. Resistance, the silent force that tries to stop you. There is a moment right before growth, right before change, right before you step into something better, where everything inside you pushes back. That feeling is resistance. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It's too much. Not today. You can do it later. This isn't necessary. And if you're not aware, you listen, not because you're weak, but because resistance feels reasonable. It doesn't look like self-sabotage. It looks like logic, like comfort, like protection. But in reality, it's the force that keeps you exactly where you are. Let's break this down. Resistance shows up every time you try to improve, every time you try to think differently, act differently, live differently, because your mind wants to stay consistent. It wants to stay in what's known, even if what's known is limiting you. So when you step outside of that, resistance appears, not to destroy you, but to pull you back into comfort, back into habit, back into familiarity. And the problem is, most people don't recognize it. They think, I'm just tired. I'm just not feeling it. I'll do it later. But what they're actually feeling is resistance. And every time they give in, they reinforce it. They make it stronger, more automatic, more convincing, until one day it becomes their default, and progress becomes rare. Now here's the truth. Resistance is not a sign you should stop. It's a sign you're moving in the right direction. Let that sink in. Because most people interpret resistance as a warning, but it's actually an indicator. It shows up when you're about to grow, when you're about to change, when you're about to step beyond your current limits. So instead of avoiding it, you need to expect it, because once you expect resistance, you stop being surprised by it. And once you stop being surprised, you stop being controlled by it. Now let's go deeper. Resistance is strongest at the beginning, at the moment of starting, before the action, before the movement, before the decision. That's when your mind creates the most excuses, because it knows if you start, it loses control. So it tries to stop you before you begin. That's why starting is so hard, and continuing becomes easier. So here's a powerful rule. Don't focus on finishing. Focus on starting. Because once you start, momentum takes over, and momentum silences resistance. Now think about this. How many times have you delayed something only to realize later it wasn't as hard as you thought? That's resistance. It exaggerates difficulty to prevent action. But once you move, that illusion disappears, and you realize it was never as big as your mind made it. Now, here's something even more important. Resistance is not just physical. It's mental. It shows up in your thoughts. I'm not ready. I don't have enough time. This won't make a difference. And if you don't question those thoughts, you obey them automatically. But now, you know better. Now you can see it. And once you see it, you can challenge it. Because resistance depends on one thing: unquestioned belief. The moment you question it, it weakens. So the next time you feel resistance, pause and ask, is this real or is this resistance? That question creates awareness, and awareness creates control. Now here's the key. You don't eliminate resistance. You move through it. You act anyway. You take the step, even when it feels uncomfortable, especially when it feels uncomfortable, because that's where growth is. Now let's connect this to discipline, because discipline is what allows you to act despite resistance. It's what keeps you moving when your mind wants to stop. And every time you do that, you build strength, not physical strength, mental strength, the kind that doesn't break under pressure, the kind that doesn't depend on motivation, the kind that says, I'm doing this regardless of how I feel, and that kind of strength changes everything, because once you can move through resistance, nothing can hold you back. Not doubt, not fear, not discomfort, because you've proven to yourself that you don't need to feel ready. You just need to act. Now imagine this. If every time resistance appeared, you moved anyway, what would your life look like? Completely different, because most people stop at resistance, but you won't. Not anymore. Now, there's one more layer we need to explore. Because even if you control your thoughts, even if you move through resistance, even if you stay disciplined, there is something that can still drain your energy, something subtle, something constant, your internal dialogue, the way you talk to yourself. Because the words you repeat internally shape your reality externally. And in the next chapter, we're going to transform that. We're going to rebuild your inner voice, because once your self-talk changes, everything changes. Chapter 14, Your Inner Voice, the Words That Shape Your Reality. There is a conversation happening inside your head all day, every day, and most of the time. You don't even notice it, because it's constant, familiar, automatic, but that voice is shaping everything, how you see yourself, how you react, how you act, how you live. It's not what people say to you that defines your life. It's what you say to yourself. Let that sink in, because your inner voice is either building you or breaking you. There is no neutral. Now think about this. When something goes wrong, what do you say to yourself? Do you say, I'll figure this out? Or do you say, I always mess things up? When you face a challenge, do you say, this is hard, but I can handle it? Or do you say, I'm not good enough for this? That difference you become is successful everything when you're thinking, because your mind listens. Everything begins, it absorbs, it believes, everything. And over time, you leave, it becomes. Think about what hit you the hardest. Now, here's the truth most people ignore. What made you talk to yourself and more than anyone resonated with you? And if that voice is negative, apply it. Critical, because limiting is not enough. You are constantly reinforcing the very patterns you're trying to escape. When you act, that's why thought control is not helps you about stopping bad thoughts. It's about personal replacing them with better ones. Not fake positivity, to staying aware, not empty affirmations. Commit to controlling your thoughts. Intentional, commit to building your life intentionally, because your inner voice, if one idea stood out to you, not destroy you. Write it down. Let's go deeper, or share it. Most negative self-talk is not intentional. It's the one thought you hold on to. Past experiences becomes the one that changes everything. From comparison, and if you want to go deeper, if you want more audiobooks like this, become more clarity, ones, more control. You repeat them to yourself. Stay connected automatically, because this is not the end. This is the beginning. But here's the shift. Now, just because one thought sounds like your voice, who are you doesn't mean it's true. From this moment it's just familiar, because your thoughts and familiarity will answer that question can be misleading, and your life. Now, here's something powerful. Follow. Your